The Packers don't seem as interested in making changes to their offensive line as we may have thought. Plus, Josh Jacobs is going to be awesome in this offense.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. For real, I loved Monopoly growing up as a kid. Played it all the time. I always wanted to play it. I wanted to play it more than anyone else. That's a true story. We got to hear from Adam Stenavich, offensive coordinator. You may have forgotten. It's been a while since we talked about him. About where he felt this offensive line was headed, where the best five, all of that stuff. After the reports from Rob Bukowski that, hey, look, the Packers might think Zach Tom is actually the guy at center. And even if that were true, Adam Stenavich does not have any incentive to lay out the whole plan to us in this moment. But it was interesting that when asked about this, he basically said, look, Jordan Morgan is a left tackle, at least a tackle for right now. We like Zach Tom on the edge, and we think Elton Jenkins' best position is either guard or center. So maybe it's Elton Jenkins whose future is at center, not guard. They're already paying him. That contract is already happened, so they don't really have to worry about it. Now that when Zach Tom comes up, they will have to pay him as a tackle if he remains a tackle, but he's a really good tackle. And although that I've made the case in the past that, look, if he's going to be a Hall of Fame, if the Packers are right that Zach Tom is a Hall of Fame caliber center, that is more valuable than a Pro Bowl caliber right tackle, it is true that tackle is more valuable than center, and we know Zach Tom is a good tackle. We don't know if any of these other players can be a good right tackle, and that distinction is important. If they let Jordan Morgan compete at left tackle and he loses, it seems like the most intuitive place for him to go is then one of the guard spots. Then I think it follows. Well, no, it does follow. I think it makes the most sense to say, hey, Elton Jenkins, why don't you move to center, and Jordan Morgan, you try left guard. And the reason is independent of what Sean Ryan looks like. It will be easier in the short run to have Jordan Morgan, who played left tackle, kick into left guard. It's a footwork thing. It's a hand in the dirt thing. And it is a comfort level thing. Switching side, this is why I have said be patient with Sean Ryan, because not only was he switching from tackle to guard, he was switching sides. He played left tackle at UCLA and is playing right guard in the NFL. That transition was always going to take time. This isn't Madden. You can just flip a position and everything is fine. It doesn't work like that. So to me, that makes the most intuitive sense to maximize your most talented players. But what if Josh Myers is playing significantly better than Sean Ryan, which is to say Sean Ryan is really playing poorly? Do they have Jordan Morgan try right guard? Do they have Elton Jenkins, who has played right tackle, so has comfort on the right side, move to right guard? Even though technically left guard is a little more valuable because it's the quarterback's blind side, so that interior spot, it's like slightly more valuable on that left side. I don't know. But I do think it is telling that at least for the moment, they are not worried about the interior of this offensive line. That they're letting Jordan Morgan compete at left tackle. If he beats out Rasheed Walker, that's kind of the best case scenario because Rasheed Walker was a good left tackle last year. If Jordan Morgan beats him out, it's because he is a better player. Like Rasheed Walker beat out Yosh Nijman because he played better. Eventually, he got more opportunities to play better, and there were some other issues behind the scenes with Yosh Nijman, but ultimately he played better and eventually was playing much better than we ever saw Yosh Nijman play. At least last year. I thought 2 years ago, and he was, anyway. We don't want to go too far afield here. Then you have a really good swing tackle, or that might be when you consider trying to get a little crazy. Do you want to flip Rasheed Walker to the right side and see what you have with Zach Tom at center? That's a lot of moving pieces, though, especially to make that work in the middle of the season. So that's why this is interesting to me, because in a year, you're going to need a new center. Like, there's almost no level of play that we could see from Josh Myers that would say you have earned an extension. Because as I've mentioned before, everydayers know this, the Packers don't give out contract extensions to mid players. They just don't do it. They give out 1-year deals. They give out prove-it deals. They don't give out like middle-class extensions. It's just not something that Russ Ball has done going back to Ted Thompson. It is, and I understand the wisdom of it, to say, look, you're either a core piece or you're a backup, and there's really no in between. And if you're a middle-class player, you're probably a lower middle-class player, because by the time you get that contract, you're in year 3, year 4, and we know what you are. Like, you're probably not going to get significantly better. So either you're one of the best players at your position, or you're a replaceable level player. That is generally what we see. And yes, there are exceptions. Some of these late breakout players, like it took Devontae Adams until the end of that third season. But by the end of that third season, he looked like a legit dude. And then, he gets the contract, but then by the time that contract is coming up, he deserves a top of market deal. And they wanted to pay him. They were a little annoying about it, it sounds like. But if that's the Josh Myers scenario, if they're going to be looking at something new in a year, do they want to try and reconnoiter on the fly what this is going to look like? Or do they just want to wait? Like, take your lumps with Josh Myers. Center is one of those spots that if Sean Ryan plays well and Elton Jenkins is playing well and you've got 2 good tackles that you can live, like we saw last year. Josh Myers, there were some good moments. He's not he's not going to kill you. There's some bad moments. There's some good moments too. Then maybe it makes the most sense if you're gonna do the thing where, okay, Jordan Morgan wins that left tackle job, you're gonna move Rasheed Walker to right tackle, which I think probably where he profiles just a little bit cleaner, and you're gonna move Zach Tom to center. The offseason is probably the time to do that. The problem with that approach, though, is then you come into the season, and if it doesn't work, like, you don't get to test it against live action. You don't get to test it against real defenses. And this is a team that I bring this up all the time because it's important when we're trying to figure out the best path here. This is a team ready to compete right now. There is no dicking around. There is no waiting to see. You need to know that these are your guys. And so and we saw this happen 2 years ago when it just wasn't working. The configurations that they were putting together just wasn't working. So they moved Elton Jenkins from tackle back to guard where he belonged. They flipped John Runyon Jr. from left guard to right guard. And the whole offense, in the middle of the season, they did this. And the whole offensive line fell into place. And it was what the offensive line probably should have looked like from the start. That's neither here nor there. The Packers are not afraid to make these changes in the middle of the season. What strikes me about this, though, is it seems like they don't want to make the change now. They don't want to start Jordan Morgan at guard with the understanding that that may be where he ends up. They want to test him at tackle, which I think is the smart thing to do. But then I want to see the next step. What's the next step? If he doesn't win that job, is it too late then? How much cross-training can you do just in training camp? Is that enough time to get him ready? Is that enough time to let him compete fully at tackle while you're also going, can he beat out Sean Ryan? Does it make sense to move Elton Jenkins to center? Like, that's a lot of moving pieces, especially for a rookie, even a rookie that's played as much football as Jordan Morgan has. These are not easy decisions. And the Packers, unfortunately for them, have not always made the right decisions when it comes to these kinds of moments. And that's what makes this particularly interesting. The Josh Jacobs decision, bringing him in, it's going to pay off. It's going to pay off in a major way. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Packers. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flagging the play. You already talked about that, but there's so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Plus hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine, and there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I just want to read you from Josh Jacobs' scouting report. This is from Lance Zierlein back in the 2019 draft. So not that long ago. Josh Jacobs, prototypical combination of size and skill as an every down runner with the ability to slash and impose his will on any given snap. Jacob runs with good bend, vision, and burst and proved to be an effective pass catcher out of the backfield or from the slot. He will probe and burst, and he could become more elusive with better tempo as a runner. Jacob is a decisive runner with outstanding one-cut talent to become a bell cow lead back. And in the strengths, I'm just going to cut to the end here. Good effectiveness as a pass catcher, used out of the backfield in packages, has the ability to track the ball like a receiver. In his NFL career, Josh Jacobs does not have a receiving touchdown. And part of that is usage. Part of that is it was a lot of checkdowns. It was a lot of swing routes. It was a lot of screens. There is, and he has talked about this, so much more that he can provide this offense. And when you look at what Aaron Jones has done here, going back to 2019, since Matt LaFleur arrived, the running, like Josh Jacobs 2 years ago led the league in rushing. We know as a running back, just as a pure rusher, he's one of the best in the league. But what I think is so exciting about what he can bring to this offense is as a vertical downfield receiver, he has more in his game than Aaron Jones did. Don't get mad. This is not a slight on Aaron Jones. But when you look at what he can do, there's just more versatility that he has. In Aaron Jones, since Matt LaFleur arrived in 2019, he had 68, 63, 65, and 72 targets in 2022. He had 43 targets last year in just 11 games. He had 65 in 15 games in 2021 and 63 in 14 games in 2020. That's a lot of targets. Josh Jacobs has never had more than 64 targets in his NFL career. And this is where I think he separates himself. Because they can build a running game around Josh Jacobs. Probably see more gap runs, though I think he's there's nothing wrong with him as a zone runner. I think he's a good zone runner. They've been trying to build in more gap here. We're seeing these Shanahan tree teams trying to run more of these power concepts. More duo. It's less outside zone, like traditional outside zone, one cut and go. We saw this with Marshawn Lloyd. They run a ton of gap at USC, but it's gap that you kind of read like zone. It's interesting the way that these NFL offenses and offenses around football have adapted to the modern game. You put some heavy people in the box, you come downhill and attack linebackers if they're going to play two high safeties, and you can get some running done. It doesn't just have to be, hey, man for man, outside, inside zone. I think that makes a lot of sense, frankly. And we'll see if teams decide to defend the Packers' passing game any differently and how that affects the running game. Now, another thing that I like about the spot that Josh Jacobs is in is Marshawn Lloyd has a lot of similarities as a runner. There's a lot of similarities as a runner. And Lloyd just has more juice. He's got more speed. And Adam Stenavich lit up talking about Lloyd yesterday and his ability. The speed and the explosiveness and the ability to create on his own. That's something that A.J. Dillon just doesn't have. A.J. Dillon's a nice running back. He's a solid backup running back. But the way that Stenavich was talking about Lloyd made me think we are a little low right now on our Lloyd stock here on Locked On Packers. That we need to be a little, not like I liked the pick. I thought he went right in the range where he deserved to go. That third round is bang on. I really, really liked Marshawn Lloyd. One of my favorite running backs in this class. Especially after he put on the weight. I could not believe, I still cannot believe he added 10 pounds and still ran 4.4s. Explosive, dynamic running back. It's going to be hard to keep him off the field. Josh Jacobs is like Marshawn Lloyd without that fifth gear, without that extra. And so if you have running backs where everyone now can just run these gap scheme runs, you don't have to change. Like when A.J. Dillon was out there, you didn't have to, you couldn't run the same runs as you could with Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones can do anything, but A.J. Dillon can't. Well, if you're going to just make some of this your bread and butter stuff, and it's what everyone is good at, that just leads to more continuity. But you have three guys who get it done in distinctly different ways. A.J. Dillon, a little bit more just bang, power, hammer. Josh Jacobs has a little bit more make you miss, a little bit more burst, can wear you down. And then you have Marshawn Lloyd who can come over and just quick as a hiccup, bang, bang, in and out of his cuts, juke in the hole. You've got dancing around linebackers and then he's gone. And then it's 20 yards before you could, what happened? It's like trying to catch a water bug. If you've ever tried to catch a water bug, it's really hard. I am so excited about what this running game can look like. And Josh Jacobs, I understand the emotional connection that so many Packer fans have because it's Aaron Jones. And we're talking about, I can't think of a Packer of recent vintage with a higher approval rating among fans, both casual and dedicated, than Aaron Jones. Everyone loved and loves Aaron Jones. But Josh Jacobs is a really, really good football player. He's going to have, if he stays healthy, a really, really good season this year because this offensive line is better. This running game is more attuned to the things that he can do well. Matt LaFleur is shown that he is someone who can cater his offense to his players. And now they have a backfield full of guys of more similar skill sets but each brings a little bit something different, a little bit different flavor. It's like, okay, you can order 3 tacos, but if you get the pulled chicken and you get the carnitas and you get the carne asada, like they're all tacos. They've all got meat in them, but they're so different. That's kind of what we're looking at here with this running back group. And I'll be honest, I know for sure AJ Dillon is the pulled chicken. I would never order a pulled chicken taco. That's just me. It's not my thing. I don't like that as much. I just would rather have, al pastor or carnitas or lengua or something like really good. It's just me. Doesn't mean the chicken's bad. Chicken's probably good. So I think the fact that Aaron Jones was such a beloved Packer and that was such a weird, unexpected thing that it has colored in a lot of ways the way that we're thinking about what this can be and has maybe tamped down the excitement. Like if the running back room had just been the one that we saw all of last year or most of last year, where it's like AJ Dillon and Emmanuel Wilson, neither of those are bad players. But to add Josh Jacobs, the guy who 2 years ago led the league in rushing, was awesome, incredible, you'd be pretty excited about that. And I think that's the right place to land here with this team. It's just circumstances has, I think, robbed Packer Nation of that excitement. So I wanted to make sure we talked about it. Speaking of that excitement, this is a young team, and that usually means volatility. It usually means roster churn. It usually means a lack of continuity. Not true of this team, and that's important. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You could bet on NFL futures. You could bet on baseball futures if you wanted to. You don't have to bet on the playoff games if you don't want to. You could bet on series, the NBA playoff series. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count, because they will give you $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. This is not usually how this works, folks. Not usually how this works. You don't have to win a new bet. They'll just give you the money. It's a beautiful thing. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched their first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Jason Fitzgerald over at Over the Cap put together the teams with the most players returning based on their current offseason roster. The only team bringing back more than 80% of their roster was the Packers. Almost 82% of the Packers roster returning. Now, Aaron Jones, a big player to not be returning, but we just talked about what they're replacing him with Josh Jacobs. Darnell Savage, a starter, not returning, but they're replacing him with Xavier McKinney, someone who was just objectively significantly better last year, and Jeff Hafley raved about him yesterday to the media. Usually, if you go back and you look at the Ted Thompson teams that were consistently among the youngest in the league, and the Packers are trending yet again to be one of the youngest in the league, if not the youngest, and potentially even younger than they were last year when they were the youngest team in the league and they were the youngest offensive skill group in NFL history. It's usually the case that the way that you stay that young is by constantly churning through your roster. That you kick the old players out. It's out with the old, it's in with the new. Every year you have to do that. And the Packers don't have to do that and haven't had to do that this offseason because they didn't have any of the old. Like Aaron Jones is the closest it comes to old. Darnell Savage we're talking about a guy who's 26, 27 years old. He's not even an old player. You're replacing him with someone who's a little younger, but that's not necessarily the appeal of that. That move was not made to get younger. That move was made to get better. And that's a key difference. Usually being this young does not come with the continuity that the Packers are bringing to this team. And so this brings me back to the conversation that we had yesterday about regression. Why would this team regress? And I cannot come up with compelling answers for why they would. Now, offensively, they were all-time great in the red zone. Okay, they probably won't do that again. 95% of low red zone trips of goal-to-go situations, they turn into touchdowns. That's crazy. But they also got unlucky scoring on explosives. They did not score at a league average rate on explosive plays. And so, okay, that you think that would kind of, that regresses a little bit too. And if the defense can get a little bit better, all this continuity on the team, a young team. And it's a young team where everyone is playing. Not like, oh, they've got a bunch of special teams guys playing an important role. No. All their core players right now are young. They're under 30. All of them. And so to have a team this young with this much continuity is rare. I mean, this is like what we talked about last year. We just don't see teams try to do what the Packers have done. And the only reason that you can have the kind of continuity that they have is because it worked. You hit on 2 straight drafts, maybe 3. We'll see what this draft class looks like. Though Edgerrin Cooper, a very encouraging start, made some big plays in rookie camp. They love Marshawn Lloyd. They love Jordan Morgan. So we'll see. But when you can put together the roster like this and pay off the approach of saying, who cares about free agents and who cares about trying to bring in, guys who we know can do the thing versus just trying to let the young kids do the thing. It works because you got the good players, because you found those guys, and that's what allows you to have continuity. But because this is so unprecedented, and that is truly the right word. Like, that's not hyperbole. That's not me being a homer. Like, what they did last year is unprecedented. And now to bring everyone back because you got unprecedented production. Now you're looking at year 2 of this thing that was unprecedented before. It remains unprecedented. And that's why I needed to bring it up again, because it's just a reminder of how special what we are currently watching in Green Bay is. And I can't wait to see what happens next. Back tomorrow, Brandon Thorne from Trench Warfare is going to join us, the preeminent media person to talk to about offensive line play. There's just no one better to talk about it. We've got our conversation with Jim Nagy coming up. So a ton more here on Locked On Packers as we roll through the offseason. We are still 5 days a week in the offseason. We will be 5 days a week here through May, 5 days a week mostly through June. We'll take some small little breaks in July, probably 3 days a week in July. But we're still going to be here rolling through the offseason. Still having a lot of fun. So follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, on all the social medias. Locked On Packers on Instagram, Locked On Packers on TikTok, Locked On Packers on Facebook, Locked On Packers on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get podcasts. That means YouTube. That means your podcast platform of choice, so you can stay Locked On Packers.